Good morning. My name is Napoleon. I think this is extremely important for you to understand what's the real threat to the United States. Um, Stay informed. Again, this is very important. Chinese is gonna take this to a different level. We have to protect our land. We have to understand what's going on. 150,000 illegal Chinese came to the United States through the open borders, and this is something we didn't know. They also have like a billion of drones already in USA land, and how we want to protect ourselves, how we want to protect your family. All right, just listen this up, and I hope it's um, our government is able to figure it out. This, all right, enjoy.
Welcome back. Chinese leader Xi Jinping claims that Beijing is deeply concerned about the Israel-Iran conflict, saying that the conflict should be de-escalated as soon as possible. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that if Iran's oil exports are cut off, China may find itself in trouble. More than 90% of Iran's oil exports go to China. President Trump's 2018 sanctions on Iran caused global demand to drop. Joining me now is the Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang to weigh in on China. Gordon, let me know how you assess this chessboard here, particularly after we know that China was sending flights, cargo flights into Iran. What is on those planes?
Yeah, we don't know, but we know this isn't good because those planes are turning off their transponders as they approach Iranian airspace. China is sending something it doesn't want the world to know. It could be ammunition, could be drones, pretty unlikely about that, but it also could be nuclear weapons. We just don't know.
Unbelievable. You have a new op-ed on how Israel just ended China's power status in the Middle East. Very interesting.
Yeah, if we go back to March 2023, it looked like China was going to drive the U.S. out of the region. That's the month where China brokered that deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Last year in July, China got 14 Palestinian factions to go to Beijing to sign what's called the Beijing Declaration, the Unity Pact. So we were sort of on the back foot. But with President Trump going to the region last month, that's really triumphal trip, and Israel targeting Iran, which is China's proxy. The Iranians don't think they're a proxy of anyone, but the Chinese think Iran is a proxy. And China's been fully supporting Iran's attack on Israel. So right now, China's policies in the Middle East are just in tatters.
Well, I mean, you might want to, someone reference, this is like Hitler losing Italy during the 1940s. I mean, China losing Iran is a big deal.
It's an enormous deal because China thought that it could drive the U.S. out of the region, could sort of start this momentum around the world that the U.S. was in retreat everywhere. And now it's the Chinese that are having problems. Remember, they've got these proxy wars around the world. They've got Russia and Ukraine. They've got North Africa, those insurgencies that look like wars. They've got Iran and, of course, Pakistan and India last month. You know, they had that 4-day war. China was fully backing Pakistan. Now all of China's initiatives seem to be failing, and that is a real indication that Beijing is in trouble globally.
Yeah. And as the Israelis win or appear to be winning, it gives more strength to the United States, which is, of course, China's #1 adversary. U.S. Ambassador to China David Perdue called out China for its threat to this global supply chain. He said this: "We have all witnessed the extent to which our businesses have become overly dependent on China for components, inputs, intermediate goods, and even entire supply chains." The governor of China's central bank outlining a plan for a global financial system relying on several major currencies, not just the U.S. dollar. So they're being complicit there as well in terms of having this basket of currencies. The New York Times also said that China is flooding the globe with cheap exports. We know that. Toys, cars, shoes, all going to places like Germany, Brazil, Indonesia at a pace that's reshaping global economies, Gordon. So this is not just a global situation. It's also impacting the economy at a time that China's economy is quite weak.
Yes, and the problem for China right now is that President Trump's tariffs cut off the U.S. market for many Chinese goods. China needs to sell them elsewhere. So they are flooding other markets, and countries are now starting to resist, including the European Union, which is an enormous market for the Chinese. Xi Jinping doesn't want consumption as the basis of the Chinese economy. His only plan is to export more. The U.S. is saying, not to our market. That leaves Xi Jinping with no options whatsoever.
Yeah, which is why President Trump has made it a priority in his agenda to get supply chains back to America, trying to encourage companies to get their supply chains here and not rely on communist China. But you made an interesting point before we sat down about this idea that the U.S. would get further involved and use the bomb busters to actually upset that nuclear site underground, the Fordow unit. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of the bunker busters and us doing that because, look, Israel has almost total control over the air over Iran. That means it can put in and extract its operatives, and they can destroy these facilities on the ground. The other thing, if we get involved, Maria, what I'm worried about is Iran's operatives in the U.S. will strike. Remember, September 11, 2023, President Biden has that deal with Iran. He gives clemency to 5 Iranian operatives, and he lets 3 of them remain in the U.S. at a time when we knew that Iran was trying to kill former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and one other senior State Department official. That was just, I can't, it's indescribable what President Biden tried to do. You know, and these operatives, they can strike us, our infrastructure, all sorts of things. We now learned afterwards that they're trying to kill President Trump. So we have to be worried about the homeland, because if the Iranian operatives strike, maybe the Chinese will go in with them, and China can do a lot of damage, not only to our civilian infrastructure, but to our military bases as well.
So you think we need to understand and remember that you...
Okay, so now there's something a lot of people was thinking about it. China became a controller or manipulating the whole world, but now they're tentaculous. They're reaching America, and I know, according to what these experts say, they're already here, and they will take advantage of this. All right, they're communists, and they hate Americans. Tell me what you think. We all have a freedom of speech. I'm a patriot. I love my country. I have wife, sisters, brothers, lots of family, kids, and I love my country. Tell me what you think.
You've got Iranian operatives in the United States right now.
Yes, along with Chinese operatives and probably Russian ones as well.
No, I mean, thanks to the wide open border, you had 150,000 Chinese nationals come into the country.
Yeah, and I think Borders Are Holman should concentrate all of his resources on breaking up those Iranian and those Chinese networks. You know, they can let others go for the meantime, but we need critically, this is the most urgent task of the federal government, is to break up these Chinese and Iranian operatives in the U.S. because their networks are extremely dangerous.
That is huge. I mean, look, Israel was so genius in the way that they did this by getting Mossad to get weapons into Iran so that they could strike from within Iran into their own country.
You know, think about
That's
this.
what you're saying here, but in the opposite.
Yeah, Israel had, you know, the drones that they had snuck into Iran.
Right.
And Ukraine snuck drones into Russia. But the Chinese don't have to do that because there's like 1 million Chinese drones in our country already that are registered with the FAA, and God knows how many that are not.
Wow.
So clearly the Chinese can do substantial damage to our country if Xi Jinping gives the get-go.
It's a great point, and I have been railing on that for years now, the fact that the U.S. military buys drones from DJI, a Chinese drone maker, which is absolutely outrageous. Now, Senators Pete Ricketts and John Fetterman are leading a bipartisan charge to codify oversight on foreign countries buying up American farmland. So there's that angle as well. I mean, look, the Chinese have come in, bought farmland near military installations. There are certain governors, like Sarah Sanders, among others, in Arkansas, who said, you're not going to buy any farmland in my state. But it's been state by state as opposed to a federal rule against it.
Yeah, and remember, we've had those 3 Chinese nationals who have been charged with smuggling in biological agents into our country. Those are probably genetically modified biological agents, and that means if Chinese-owned farmland, those agents can take those germs, those fungus and whatever, and actually start a blight in the United States.
Wow.
We know that blight that the nationals brought in, Chinese nationals brought in, they can go after wheat, corn, barley, maize. It causes problems in humans and livestock. This is an attack on American farms and American ranches. This is a weapon of mass destruction, and we shouldn't allow the Chinese to own land in our country because we can't own land in their country.
Right.
Exactly.
Why would we do that? Well, I mean, look, this is also partly President Trump's genius. He doesn't want China and the Communist Party to really know how he's thinking about things. And that's good in many ways. You know, when you consider the fact that, they've come in, they've brought this pathogen, and we're still negotiating a trade deal. I don't know how we negotiate a trade deal with such a bad actor, and yet President Trump doesn't want to poke the bear too much to actually trigger World War III.
Yes, and to trigger those Chinese agents in our country as well, because we're not prepared right now. So, yeah, I can understand that he's sort of letting it go a little bit, but I really liked Ambassador Perdue's comments because he was very explicit about America starting to get a resilient supply chain. You know, in the Biden administration, you had Janet Yellen talk about friendshoring, and she was very polite about it. I'm glad that Ambassador Perdue is specific.
Oh, God, for God's sakes, they fed her mushrooms when she went to China, and then she went to the bar and, yucked it up and laughed about it.
And bowed to a Chinese official.
Oh, my goodness. Unbelievable. Gordon, thank you. Such important insights from you. We appreciate you always,
Okay.
Gordon Chang.
So this is getting serious. So
Welcome back. Breaking news this morning and overnight, day 5 of Israel's war on Iran and its nuclear facilities. The IDF has killed Iran's newly appointed wartime chief of staff, the most senior military commander closest to the Ayatollah. He was only on the job
doesn't
for 4
look good,
days
my
after his
friends.
predecessor
Doesn't
was
look
killed.
good at all.
President Trump maintaining on Truth Social,
Stay
Tehran
informed.
cannot have a nuclear weapon,
And
and that
pray to
Iran
God.
should have already come to the table to make a deal. The president